What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the Sam's Report. It is a wonderful Friday, early April. The Masters tournament is on. I'm a huge golf fan. I'm an avid golfer. I was about to say an avid terrible golfer because both of those things are true. But here we are yet again talking Microsoft, talking tech, talking a little bit of everything this week. And it's actually a birthday today. I believe it was April 6th. 1992 was when Windows 3.1 was released, so that is turning a stout 26 years old, now getting a lower rate on its car insurance at this point in its life cycle. And so if you're still running Windows 3.1, that would be amazing, but I suspect that many people aren't, because there's a lot of stuff going on. And so the dust is settled, I think, at this point. The dust is settled about the great reorganization inside of Microsoft. And, there's opinions all across the board. I wrote some stuff up on what I thought this meant for the enterprise and kind of Windows side over on Petri. Reality is sinking in that this is Microsoft's future, and that's fine. There's a lot of negativity around this, which is justifiable and understandable. People are nervous. People typically don't like change. Microsoft's Windows has been the foundation of just about everything the company has done since its inception. And when that thing changes, you should be concerned if you are a Windows fan. By all means, you should be concerned if you use Windows on a daily basis. But at the same time, I don't think people should be overly dramatic that this is like Microsoft just abandoned Windows like it did mobile. You got to remember that there are close to 700 million people running Windows 10. That is not an insignificant number. That is a huge swath of the population running just Windows 10, more than 1 billion people running Windows. And so it's there's been some overreaction, there's been some correction, and it's one of those things we just got to give it a chance to kind of see what happens. And because let's just kind of think about this in the grander scheme that Microsoft, and I firmly believe this, and people will push back, but Microsoft is prioritizing the enterprise, which they've been doing now for a while. But I think they're going more heavy-handed into the future, which, granted, if you're a consumer and you're looking for the next great desktop feature, you might be getting a little nervous, but at the same time, I'd actually really love to know what the next great desktop feature is, because I'm not looking at Windows 10 and saying, oh my God, there's just massive holes all over the place. They're missing things, and there's features that it doesn't have, or Mac OS is just blowing past it in features and functionality. I don't look at Windows 10 and think that. What makes sense here is look what Microsoft announced this week in regards to Office. So with Office 365, they are now bringing to the home and personal SKUs, files backup, encrypted email options, and a whole bunch of enterprise features, which is sort of a trickle-down effect, if you will, because they brought all this stuff to the enterprise, they hardened it, made it great, which is kind of the inverse of what we typically see. Typically, it goes to the consumer, gets hardened, then goes up to the enterprise. But in this case, they're bringing all that stuff to the consumer, and that's what's going to happen with Windows going forward. They're going to start bringing all these enterprise features, and then they'll trickle down to the other SKUs, unless it's some sort of obvious consumer feature. But when I look at Windows 10 and think of things that are missing, such as some sort of migration between mobile and desktop, that's all done through apps. That's not really done through a core desktop experience, at least not yet. And so if people are looking at Windows and saying, gosh, there's so much missing, I would honestly love to know what it is. The biggest thing that I think is missing is kind of sets, which is coming. We know that's coming with Redstone 5. There's some gaming functionality on the horizon too, but Microsoft is also scrapping a lot of things from Redstone 5. I don't think they're fully locked in. Specifically, I'm hearing from insiders at the company that, so first off, I want to give Paul a little tip of the hat, because I believe he was absolutely right on this. Microsoft with movies and TV is looking at that movies, I think it's called Movies Anywhere, which basically means you can take your content that you've purchased through Microsoft and move it everywhere. That is absolutely in the works or in the process. But apps like weather, stocks, and a couple other built-in Windows 10 apps, I think those are going to go away. They're built by, and I actually know some people who worked out of these offices at one point. They worked out of the Paris office. Microsoft had an office in France, and that was building a lot of this stuff. And I believe that those teams are being dissolved or broken up or moved about. I don't think they're getting laid off. I don't think that, at least not yet. And I think they were given options to go work on other teams, but I would not be expecting any sort of major updates to the kind of built-in apps, excluding potentially calendar and email. that one's kind of an outlier at this point. But you got to remember too, think about what I think I broke the news potentially. I can't even remember anymore. Remember Microsoft did their last round of kind of like quasi layoffs and made some changes under Kudo's org. Kudo's is kind of like Kudo is actually a person. He runs Windows.next and had like Paint 3D and all that kind of jazz, Windows mixed reality, some stuff in there. And that got shaken up because I don't think Paint 3D is really caught on in any meaningful way. And so that app I don't think is going to get much love. The Photos app I don't think is going to get too much more crazy than it is. Mostly because these apps are superfluous to the Windows 10 experience. Yes, they're fine, but they're not really things if you think about it. They don't translate well to mobile. Microsoft is going, it's funny. It's funny. They just kind of dipped away from this mobile first, cloud first thing to this intelligent edge thing. But what I'm hearing inside of the company is that the mobile experience is becoming significantly more prioritized, if you will. Microsoft needs to make its experiences, if I can talk correctly, great on Android and iOS, and that's not an option. That's not like, okay, yeah, it can be second class. No, these things have to be first class citizens more so than they do on Windows, because if you're running Windows, Microsoft has already won on the desktop. It's not winning, and it's not going to win in the mobile space. iOS and Android have won that battle. BlackBerry lost, Microsoft lost, Nokia lost, Palm lost. People tend to think in these isolated buckets that only Microsoft got destroyed by these two platforms, but it was an entire industry got shaken up by the birth of iOS and Android, and that's okay, that's fine. What Microsoft has to adapt to now is living in a world where it is not the OS creator, which for Microsoft is a big deal because typically they have been the OS creator, but for the rest of the world, this is par for the course. Like that little golf analogy there, that running on somebody else's platform is a viable way of doing business. Look at how many companies exist by running their apps on other platforms. Adobe's a premier kind of company that can do this. There's tons of them. And so this is the world that Microsoft is heading into, and that's okay, only in the mobile space. Now, the reality becomes, how do they capitalize upon this mobile stuff? Because they need to find a differentiator that is themselves and that is kind of like the hero device. And so I haven't heard specifically, but Andromeda, the device, it would not surprise me if it runs Android. It's going to be, or some flavor, or have some tie-in to Android natively, because I think that's what Microsoft has to do. Think about what Microsoft does with Surface devices, such as this machine back here. Like, look at this one. Like, you got like the Surface Pro. You have like, they try to, when they do that, they try to define an industry or a segment. And so Andromeda running just a small version of Windows or being a mobile version of Windows doesn't really make sense into what Microsoft is doing. If Microsoft built a dual screen hinged Android device that docked and ran Continuum on the PC experience and then natively tied into the Android ecosystem on the go, I think that would be a very interesting product and a way for Microsoft to differentiate themselves and actually, to be honest, be quite blunt about their future. Because it has to exist on Android no matter what. It doesn't matter at this point. There's not going to be a resurgence of Windows Mobile. The reason why we know that is look what they've just done to the team. They broke up Windows Devices Group. And so Microsoft has to find a way to work with Android apps. They have to. There's no way about this. They're doing some interesting things in the store, and we'll see more about that, I think, at Build. And it gives me hope. The reason why this puts me in a little bit of an optimistic mood is if Microsoft can actually, I mean, look what Samsung has done. Let's be honest here, guys. Samsung has done a wonderful job of building their own hardware, integrating Android, and dominating a sector. I mean, if you think about Android, more than likely, and it's not holistic, more than likely you're going to think Galaxy, right? You can say Pixel, but Google's phones don't sell in nearly the volume. I thought, God, it was like a couple million. Not that crazy. Samsung owns Android, regardless of what Google says or does, right? They have the hardware that most people are buying. Yes, there's a lot of derivatives and all that stuff, but Microsoft there's room in that market for Microsoft to play with their own unique experiences. And the basis of this is they have to be able to tap into that rich app ecosystem, which Microsoft was unable to build in a mobile sector. And this is kind of like the bold decision that Microsoft has to make, because if they do that, they have to just kind of look in the mirror and be real with themselves here and say, hey guys, we're not winning in mobile. We're not. It's not happening. We have to embrace the realities that we are placed in front of us. And I think Satya understands that. At least I hope that he does. I hope that he's just not chasing the cash cow that is cloud, which granted there's a lot of money there, but there also needs to be some underlying motivation behind Windows, because the thing, in my opinion, that is missing right now from the Microsoft world is that driving enthusiasm, if you will. Azure is great. Office is great. They make money and they do that, but nobody gets excited about Office 365 unless you're a Microsoft accountant, maybe. Nobody gets excited about Azure because Microsoft, let's be real here, Microsoft has won the productivity space. Now, granted, Google is playing around, but I don't see them overthrowing Office 365 in any time in the near future. They've got a long way to go in the cloud, but they're a second place competitor, and it's good for the market that they exist. And I'm happy that Google Apps is here and forces Microsoft to keep pushing Office 365. But people don't get excited about that. Nobody gets excited. Let's be honest, most people don't really get excited about Windows anymore. It's great. I love Windows 10. It is by far the best Windows operating system I have ever used. I'm very happy with it on just about every single day. I'm still running RS3. I'll be up on RS4 soon. Once it gets pushed out, this is my production machine. I don't dare screw with it. And it has been rock solid and great. I'm running 3 4K monitors. There's some DPI issues here and there, but whatever. Like, it's great. I love this machine. I love the computer that I built. I love Windows, but it doesn't get me excited. Like, I don't get out of bed and run downstairs and be like, oh yes, I'm using Windows today. And so this leads me up to Build. Build being Microsoft's developer conference. I don't have any insider information. I haven't poked around or asked Microsoft because, like, what am I going to email them and say, hey guys, your developer conference hasn't sold out. What gives? Microsoft needs some sort of driving force to get people excited about Windows again. Now, they had this with HoloLens, but they didn't flail around. I was going to say falter, but I don't think that's the correct word here. They didn't screw it up. I think they took a slow and cautious approach. They didn't get crazy aggressive, which might be a mistake, in my opinion. It might be a little bit of a mistake. But let's just think about this. There's nobody competing with them directly right now on HoloLens, which is good from one aspect. That means Microsoft is out first out of the gate, but we've seen Microsoft first out of the gate and screw it up and fall behind. What they need to do is be a driving force behind that and have a hero project. And HoloLens is getting a little stale, if you will, right? We've been there. It's been a couple years. We know that they canceled V2. And one of the questions this week, and I'm just going to dive into it now, asked what I know about HoloLens V2 because I was the one that broke the story about it being canceled. And here's what I know. So we're going to see it, I think, sooner rather than later. Maybe we might see it at Build. We might. I don't know if here, the reason why I'm hesitant to fully say, yes, we will absolutely see it at Build is I don't think Microsoft knows yet, right? Build is still a month away and you're thinking, man, they got to have this stuff all locked down. It's a crazy world. What I do know about Microsoft and their next version of HoloLens is, one, it absolutely does exist. That there's no question about this. I have no concerns about that. They are building it almost all in-house. This is different than what they did before. This is actually how I got the scoop that HoloLens V2 was canceled, because previously Microsoft was building HoloLens using third parties, right? They would go to a contract manufacturer and do all that stuff. They are they have brought everything in-house, including building the new light engine that is doing all that stuff. That is in-house. This is why it's a little bit harder to get information, because there's no third parties involved. And so Microsoft is building it all in-house. It's going to be a much more custom application. Windows Central had some information, but it's all been known, right? Better battery life, obviously. Wider field of view, obviously. We already know that thing. We already knew that stuff. What's going to be different about it is that this is designed to be a more approachable product. Is what I've heard, because right now HoloLens V1, it's a little overwhelming, if you will, because it's a big bulky thing. It's new. It's Microsoft. It is blasting photons into your eyeballs. It's a little out there. So you can imagine a more streamlined device, a wider field of view. Microsoft is building this stuff in-house because of the tolerances are insane for this type of thing. You think about Surface Book or Surface Laptop right here for a second. This is a hinge, right? It goes through the manufacturing process, and there's tolerances, if you're not familiar with manufacturing, that says, hey, this thing has to be so many inches long and so wide, and so that this function and this hinged fulcrum up here has to be a certain degree and amount of resistance, right? That's called a tolerance. When it comes to shooting light into your eyes, those tolerances are on a scale so tiny that even a small, I've heard the term like seventh or eighth deviation from the standard results in a failed product. And so this is an insanely tough project to work on, which is why it takes a while and why people aren't just throwing this stuff out the door. But I definitely think that HoloLens V2 is going to have to be that champion product. I don't know if the Andromeda project will. It might be coming this year, but I'm more confident that we will see HoloLens V2 this year. Technically it's a V3 because they scrapped V2, but that's semantics at this point. And so I'm looking to see what they're going to talk about at Build this year that is going to change the game on the narrative for Microsoft. Microsoft, I give them a lot of crap for poor communication. There was poor communication yesterday about this AMD 64 app, emulation compatibility with ARM. That was a nightmare. But what I think that they're doing here, the reason why they announced this reorg, this massive reorg, and Terry's exiting relatively early, if you will, is because remember, Terry's sticking around for a few months, is that they needed time to build the narrative to be talked about at Build. Because if they don't give firm direction and form a foundation of confidence around Windows and Microsoft going forward, they're going to have a problem. And I'm hopefully confident that that is what Microsoft is doing. Now, if we get to Build and they're waffling on the direction of Windows, this is going to be terrible for Microsoft. I can't stress how much that is. I've told them that privately on the many phone calls we've had over this, is that they have to come out of Build and be very confident about the direction and hold fast to it, because everyone's right now going, yeah, what's going on? And we all look at Build and saying, okay, Build is where Microsoft is going to clarify the direction of Windows. They're going to talk about it, because I've heard pretty well that Redstone 5, that a lot of things that were going to be in it were kind of scrapped, or things are up in the air as new management is now making decisions, which is good and bad. The bad part is that if they're not already starting to build this stuff, the likelihood of it getting included in RS5 is diminished, right? Because they actually have to say, this is what we're going to build. This is how we're going to build it. And then this is when we build it. And then this is when we beta test it. And this is when we ship it. They got 6 months. That's not a lot of time. And so that's the only thing that has me kind of concerned. But if they can come out on stage and say, look, here's what we're doing for these next builds of Windows. This is the direction we're taking. These are the product features that we're looking for. This is how we're going to harden it. This is what we're doing. That would be fantastic. And then they come out on stage and say, hey, look, here's HoloLens V2. This is a very early generation of the product. It's better, bigger, better, stronger. There's that. And then they talk about, they're going to have to talk about their mobile experiences too, because this is a developer conference, and it needs that. You can't just say this is how you build for cloud and this is how you build for desktop and just ignore mobile. You can't ignore mobile for Microsoft anymore. And so this is why I'm hoping for the clarification about how does Microsoft align its developers and its partners and everything else around this cloud, desktop, mobile experience, now knowing that mobile is not a part of it. They can't just say, well, just build a great app on Android. They need a way to define how you build a great Android app using Microsoft experiences and the cloud and all that stuff. And so, you know, the ball isn't, as traditionally, the ball is in Microsoft's court to clarify, give us solid direction. And I'm not pessimistic about it. I just want to make sure that Microsoft understands the magnitude that they're in right now, because they're changing, right? They took the boat that was going this way, they spun the wheel, and they're going that way, which is fine. I think it's the right move, but I would just like to see the clarification of now their new strategy that Satya has kicked off with this Intelligent Edge memo and all that good stuff. And so it's interesting times in Microsoft's world. It's interesting times because of uncertainty, which isn't always a good thing. But I tend to agree that it was absolutely the right decision. Now we just wait for, okay, they've turned the ship. How does the rest of the org that was focused on other things align to that strategy? And so HoloLens being a key part of that. I don't know what's going to happen with Windows mixed reality and all this. They very clearly started to push towards the enterprise segment, which again is what they know and where they make a whole bunch of their money. But they've got this unique thing with HoloLens. The question is, can they capitalize upon it to go there? Rachel in the comments says, realistically, it needs to be under 1,000 to be useful. I absolutely agree. This is really hard to price. This is really hard to price. It's $1,500 right now, which to be honest is a lot. It's an absolutely a lot of money, but is it a crazy amount of money? I don't know. I mean, think about people are paying $1,200 for an iPhone, for an iPhone X and all that stuff. Now, granted, it's a totally different thing, but yeah, the thing that it needs to do, obviously wireless, that's not an issue. It needs to carry on that seamless experience between desktop, mobile, and holographic, because the worst thing you want to do is be working on a project on your PC and then you're going over here in holographic mode or whatever, and then you have to reset everything up. But Microsoft knows this. I know they know this because they've told me this. They said this is the goal of all this stuff. And so I will be very curious to see how this plays out. And build, we are almost exactly a month away. And I'll be there, Paul will be there, Mary Jo will be there, everybody will be there. And it'll be good. It'll be good. All right, moving on to some other things. New 8th gen Core, Intel Core i9. Oh, Jesus, I can't talk. There's new 8th gen Intel Core i9, i7, i5 processors based on Coffee Lake, which kind of begs the question of when's Microsoft going to put those chips into Surface? That'd be great. Especially like this one back here, which is cost $4,200. And it's still running like a 960 GPU or something like that, and an old 6th gen processor. So they really need to get on the ball of updating this stuff. A whole bunch of partners announced it, and all they need to do is just swap the silicon, maybe update the GPU, and just go quietly into the future. They don't need a redesigned Surface Book. They don't need a redesigned Surface Pro. Just give us new chips inside. One other thing too, I've been playing, well, this is broken, but I've been playing the Xbox quite a bit. I've talked about PUBG quite a bit on this podcast. I've been playing it a lot on the Xbox One S back there. And I got to tell you, playing with friends, playing with a group of 4 is absolutely wonderful. We got a chicken dinner last night. And if you haven't checked the game out, it is absolutely still very rough around the edges. The frame rate still kind of sucks. There's times where it feels like I'm getting 15 frames per second. But there is no better experience than absolutely playing with your friends. So I enjoy that aspect much more. I enjoy playing with my friends more than I enjoy better frame rates and better graphics at the end of the day. And so Redstone 4, which is officially done, Microsoft has it in every preview ring available on a fast, slow, and a release preview, except, yeah. It'll be coming to everybody. I would imagine Patch Tuesday. Patch Tuesday is what, next Tuesday at this point? That's typically when they ship out stuff, so I would think they would start making it available then. I don't believe it's going to be called Spring Creators Update, but we will see what Microsoft does for the naming in the near future. And one last thing here before we dive into the questions. This is interesting, you'll see why I'm going this way. So Apple kind of put out some fluff pieces with a PR, or a PR, basically was, with some news organizations, or I think it was only one potentially, I don't even know. Anyways, so Microsoft's Apple's Mac Pro, their high-end video editing rig, isn't coming until 2019. Now, technically, they said in 2017 when they did this, which it was about a year ago, they held a kind of a weird thing where they invited certain press orgs, and they came and talked about how they're going to redesign the Mac Pro, how their first-gen Mac, or their new Mac Pro, the one that looks like a trash can, was too hard to update, and they basically screwed up. They put design over function. And so the information came out this week that the Mac Pro is not coming until 2019, which is fine. They have the iMac Pro, I guess, if you want a super high-end rig, whatever. That's not the point of where I'm headed here. We know that roughly speaking, Apple's development cycle takes about 2 years from when they start building a product to when it actually ships, which is, I would assume that's about normal. I don't know what other companies' dev cycles are, but just knowing from when leaks come out to when products ship, we can base it on roughly 2 years. And there were some other smarter people who calculated that timeline a while ago. And so here's kind of the thing. So if it takes roughly 2 years to build a product inside of Apple, which seems logical and reasonable, and this product isn't coming out until 2019, so 2019 would make it basically 2 years since Apple announced everything in 2017, which to me sounds like they went, oh crap, we need to do something with the Mac Pro. We're getting a lot of negative press, so they hastily put all this stuff together before they really had any idea what they were going to do. Because if you go for a 2 year timeline, this product won't be out for another year at minimum, roughly. And then it was a year ago, so that's 24 months that have roughly gone by until the product ships. We know that Apple's dev cycles are 24 months. This was very much a reaction. They found themselves in a bad spot. They got complacent. And I don't know if this has anything to do with it, the Surface Studio, because people were getting real, I don't know, toying up with the idea that that was a Mac Pro, and I don't know. But yeah, so there is that. All right, going to dive into the questions this week. Not too many, probably because I put the thread up a little late, but well, there's a handful of them for sure. Take a drink. Eustman writes, long post, a few points to touch on. Is there any word about a higher wattage Surface Book 2 charger running mixed reality on the 15 inches draining the battery? Interesting. No, I have not heard anything about a higher wattage Surface Book 2 charger. I don't have a Windows mixed reality headset, but that's actually really interesting if that specific experience is draining the battery. I don't know. I need to find someone because I don't know if I want to spend $300 on a mixed reality headset just to test battery life. But yeah, interesting. If anybody has a Surface Book 2, he doesn't say, oh, on the 15 inch. So specifically the beefy one, which I do have a 15 inch, but I don't have mixed reality. So if you have a Surface Book 2 15 inch and a mixed reality headset, please plug it in and try to drain the battery while using it. I'd be curious to see if that actually, I know there were some concerns about gaming, but I don't think those were too much of an issue, but that was not specifically talking about mixed reality. Very good question. Secondly, do you have any information about HoloLens V2, V3? Just if you're just now tuning into the podcast, scroll back a little bit because I talked about what I knew. Thirdly, is Microsoft's lack of a great consumer service going to hurt in the enterprise? I say this because if you look at Amazon or Google, they have services that are the #1 services in their industry. Amazon also hosts Netflix and runs Twitch, and Google has the most visited website and runs YouTube and Gmail, which is used by quite a few people. I've seen developers discredit Azure completely because Microsoft just doesn't have any consumer cloud like in Google, consumer cloud like Google, and cloud customers like Amazon. So let me put it this way. It's definitely not helping the fact that they have no consumer. That you can't say, well, Microsoft has no consumer base. This is going to do great. I mean, look what IBM has zero consumer presence. And I wouldn't exactly say that they are in a swimmingly good position by any means. So is it hurting them? Yes. Is it going to take down the company? No, because they still have, don't forget, they still have Surface, they still have Xbox, they still have Office 365 and all that stuff. So they have a very good foundation to grow all that. It's kind of hard to say what is the direct impact. Would they have more market share if they were the most beloved company like Apple in the consumer space? I definitely think they would. But remember too that Apple did make kind of an enterprise push, right? They were getting a lot of love for iOS and the iPhone, and they put a lot of effort into iWork initially, and it didn't pan out. It never really worked. And so just because you have a consumer company doesn't mean you can make that flip to enterprise. Apple is a good example of that. They have tried in small areas and just never found huge success like they have with the consumer side, which is fine. So don't always correlate consumer success to great enterprise success. But on the same time, it definitely would not hurt Microsoft because people would love to have the same OS on their phone as their desktop, as in their cloud, to make things easier. But that reality did not materialize. Lastly, I usually skip over all this stuff, but I'll just completely whatever. Lastly, is there any drama between Thurrott and Windows Central? I don't think so. I don't know. Let me explain that I just don't care. I wake up every day. I write my stuff. I do my stuff. I poop on bad things that happen. I celebrate good things that happen. And if somebody writes something dumb, I will say they wrote something dumb. If somebody writes something great, I will write something great. Peter Bright wrote some stuff last week that I was championing. I don't know. I have no idea. I don't really pay attention to anybody else, and I don't really care. That it doesn't make any difference. At the end of the day, I write my stuff, and that's what I do for a living. Actually, I do a lot more than writing. I do podcasting. Let's see, we do a crap load of stuff on the Petri Enterprise side and all that good stuff. And JLV632, in the market for an iPad Pro, and I find the limit on Office 365 license stretched at the moment. Oh, got it. And a licensing question. Is the 10-inch screen rule still in play as the limit for free Office apps? If so, I'm wondering if I'm betting off skipping of the 12-inch and going to the 10-inch model and buy the 9.7-inch iPad Pro that came out. Does that loophole work? Let me put it this way. If you're looking for licensing loopholes, I would be careful because those can change at any time. They're very artificial. And if Apple starts calling their tablets a computer, Microsoft might start saying, hey, maybe they are, and we should change the licensing. I'm not specifically aware if that 10-inch rule is still in effect. If anybody knows for certainty, obviously drop it in the comments below. Licensing is kind of nuts, and I try to avoid it because there's an individual named Wes Miller on Twitter, a good friend of mine. He would be the person to ask because he knows all this stuff. He actually does Microsoft licensing boot camps on this stuff. So which iPad should you buy? Buy the one that fits your lifestyle. If you absolutely think that the 12-inch higher end iPad Pro is going to be better for you, you can always change the software. You can never change the hardware. Just remember that before you go make a decision about buying. Kadupa says, I'm not sure if this is in the show is already done, but I have my question up about Google Photo AI. Oh, never mind. He just put this in 30 minutes ago. How's Google doing its AI backed up photo thing? It needs a lot of data to be fed into it, AI to work really good. Where is it getting that data from? Internet, Google Photos? I'm not using my tinfoil hat. Well, yeah, there's people like me. I have 1 terabyte of OneDrive access. Microsoft won't let me buy anymore, so I had to move my photos. And where did I move them to? Moved them all to Google Photos because it's an excellent service. It works very well. And I basically am feeding Google's AI machine by doing that. They let me store it for free with the I think they'd say it, maybe not, but basically they can help train their AI models on the photos of all my vacations. And so that's where they get a lot of their data from. And that's how they start to train it. It's a very smart move at the expense of they now have to pay for that storage, but storage is insanely cheap. And so they found a way to get their photos to do their training. And yeah. Okay, Adam Corbally says, Microsoft's new strategy is based on subscription services. The only problem with that model is that Google offers similar products for free, many of which are better or rapidly improving. How do they hope to address this? Well, it depends what you're talking about. Like if you're talking about Google Apps are not free for everybody, especially on the corporate side. They're starting at $5 a license, essentially, which Microsoft does actually offer a $5 a month Office 365 business license. I know because that's what I'm currently on for our corporate one, because I have a whole bunch of the home and personal licenses. And so that actually does exist. In the enterprise space, they don't offer a whole lot for free, I don't believe. I mean, Google Sheets, you need a license for that stuff. And don't forget that if you have OneDrive, I believe you can use Office web apps for free as well. They're not great, but they definitely can be used in a pinch, by all means, especially PowerPoint for quick and light and easy editing. Second question is, what do you think should make? Do you think Microsoft should make an Edge book thin client like Chrome OS? A better name, maybe like Office Book, that is designed and focused on people in Microsoft services. Yeah, I do. They need a thin client. They absolutely do. And it's an interesting thing that Microsoft has gone this long. It's sort of, people will say that Windows Mobile was supposed to morph into that, which I think is a terrible analogy personally, because it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Microsoft needs essentially a very lightweight Microsoft launcher that looks like Windows. Think of it almost as Continuum, but it's, again, powered by everything in Azure. You can use Office web apps on the internet, connect into OneDrive. I mean, you can kind of see, like, you can kind of put the pieces together. So if you have all your files on OneDrive and then you open them up on the web, you don't need any local storage, right? And that takes care of a vast amount of productivity scenarios, especially for the lightweight user. Which is why I've been wondering why Microsoft hasn't put together this lightweight, streamlined, thin client for a true Chrome OS competitor. They have all the building blocks for it with Azure, with Office on the web, with the Microsoft Store now. But they've yet to pull the trigger on it. And I don't know, there's multiple reasons. I don't know if they just don't see that there's any money to be made there, which there may not be. They may not have a lot of market share there. And maybe that's one of the reasons why. The de-emphasis of Windows might be another one of those. But I still think that it makes a lot of sense that you could run an entire iteration of Windows through a browser as well. And you could do that in the same type of environment. Imagine that you go to work and all you do is you just open a web browser and you go to azure.com/your org company name or whatever, make up your own URL, and you log in using Azure Active Directory, and then there's all your crap. Granted, you're running it over the web, so you're restricted by that bandwidth, but it's a super thin client with high-end functionality and capabilities running it. So they need to be doing something in this. If they're not, I'll be curious. So curious as to why. Tourniquet says, I heard Paul was saying that reorgs already affects some plans for Redstone 5 and that some are already canceled. Do you have any more insight? So yeah, go back and listen to earlier. Some of the apps are just being nuked, like weather, stocks, and some of those other things are getting, I don't think they're going to be around too much longer. I shouldn't say they might not be around. They're just not going to be updated significantly or see any massive new features. But at the same time, what do you really? You shouldn't be using the stocks app as your portfolio manager by any means. So there you go. Luke says, what do you think of the new Twitter PWA? I actually just used it yesterday. I like it. My problem is that I like TweetDeck better, or Tweetin made by Mahedi, even better. The streaming functionality, I just like nice, neat, compact, like on my Twitter, or on TweetDeck, I have everything collapsed. I don't show media, I don't show audio playing videos, it's just the text, and I like that kind of content dense things, and it streams. I don't think the new Twitter PWA app streams as quickly as TweetDeck, and you can't do columns. I need columns because I have certain searches set up that I monitor for content. But it's good for what I would call a normal user of Twitter. I'm definitely not a normal user of Twitter. I think it's absolutely perfect and a good example of what a PWA can be. And then Marmon Trout says, I saw something on Twitter about some announcements at Build. Any idea what those are? No. Well, I mean, I gave some speculation about what I think they're going to talk about, but without knowing specifically what you're referring to, it's a little bit tough. It's a little bit tough. And so, what another kind of interesting week, guys. I think the interest in what Microsoft is doing here is going to continue to go up over the next few weeks. And I hope, as I mentioned about a million times in this podcast, I hope that Microsoft is aligning very clear-cut communications for Build about the direction of everything Windows, because that is what we're all here for, and that's what we all want. Can Brad read what? I can't. It's kind of hard to scroll up and read. Gotham said, what is going on with the Xbox currently at Microsoft? I think good things. I've heard nothing but good things about the Xbox right now. Just remember that they announced at E3 that they're going to have their largest venue yet. We just got the Xbox One X. There is an Elite V2 controller in the works. I'm hoping that it's going to be announced at E3. Some pictures of that already leaked out. Gaming is an interesting thing for Microsoft because it's in the hardcore gaming space, it's only a two-horse race. It's only Sony and Microsoft. Nintendo is out like on their own little island over there. And while what they do does impact the Xbox, it's not, it is a direct competitor, but it's not. They've always had their nice own little niche, Nintendo has, and I'm very happy for them. I love their products, but they don't really compete directly against Microsoft and Sony, because Sony and Microsoft go head-to-head with this online gaming and all that stuff. So, all right, folks. Well, that's going to wrap it up for today. And I hope everybody has a wonderful weekend. I'll be curious to see what next week brings. Hopefully, we're going to get our hands on, everybody will get their hands on Redstone 4. And if you really want it, you can just opt into the release preview and grab it right now. But I typically like to wait and get everything over the vanilla channels just to make sure, because that's what, the bulk of the world is going to do. And if any issues arise during that, you should go there. So, all right, guys, that wraps up for today. Have yourselves a wonderful weekend, and we'll catch you right back here next time.